What can you plant in January? January may seem like an exciting time to start planting, but here's the deal. Not every crop is ready to be planted just yet, even indoors. But depending on your climate, some crops can and should be started soon. In today's video, I'll walk you through exactly what I'm planting this month, inside my grow room, in my greenhouse, and even in my garden, and why these choices work for my climate. Even if your climate is different than mine, these are the crops that veteran gardeners plant first, whenever that may be for you. Before we get to the crops, it's important that you know where I am gardening from. I am in Arkansas Zone 8A, and my average last frost date is in early April. That means that January is way too early to be thinking about planting summer-loving crops like tomatoes and peppers. Instead, now is the time to start planting cool season crops, though not all of them. Here are the ones that I plant first. Number 1, onions. Growing onions from seed hasn't been the easiest for me, so if you're a new gardener, you might prefer to buy onion transplants. But if you do want to grow from seed, they are the first seeds I sow indoors or in my heated greenhouse with supplemental grow lighting. Onions need about 10 weeks inside, maybe even a little bit more, before they're even ready to be planted outside. And since onions can be planted in the garden about a month before my average last frost date, I'm actually a bit late already. Number 2, broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower. I start these seeds indoors in mid-January with the goal of transplanting them out in early March, 1 month before my average last frost date. This timing is crucial for those of us in hotter climates because broccoli and cauliflower especially will fail when they're planted too late. They are quick to go to flower in warm weather, causing all of that effort to go to waste. Number 3 is celery. Like onions, celery takes a long time to grow. I start celery seeds inside at the same time as broccoli and cabbage, about mid-January, but I don't plan to transplant them into my garden until about 2 weeks before my average last frost date. Celery isn't as cold hardy as other cool season crops. It will take a freeze, but temperatures in the 20s can cause damage. But it also doesn't like the heat, so it's important not to wait too late. Number 4 is lettuce. I start my first lettuce indoors in mid-January with the purpose of transplanting them either outside or in my greenhouse in late February to early March. I do have to be vigilant to cover when temperatures get too much below freezing, but by starting my first round of lettuce early, I'm able to get a quicker harvest. For those first plantings, I choose more cold-tolerant varieties like Winter Density and Tango. 2 weeks later, in late January, I'll start a second round of lettuce indoors to keep the successions of lettuce and salads going. Number 5 is parsley, feverfew, echinacea, oregano, marshmallow, and other cold hardy herbs that are slow growing. Many herbs planted from seed can take a long time to germinate and grow. They aren't the easiest to see through to transplant, but with some indoor seed starting skill, they are great options to save money on expensive transplants. I start these in mid-January, and often I will keep them in my greenhouse. If they are perennial crops in my climate, meaning they would normally survive the winter anyway, I'm not worried about keeping them too warm or too cool. In nature, they would grow on their own soon anyway, so I might as well just follow nature's lead. Number 5, I am planting greens, arugula, and spinach in January. For the first crops we talked about, all of those were either started indoors or in my greenhouse, but for greens, arugula, and spinach, I can start these directly in the garden, either outside or in my green stalk or in the greenhouse if I want to. These are among the coldest hardy greens, and as long as the soil can be worked, their seeds can be planted in the soil for an early spring or even late winter harvest. Number 6 is greenhouse tomatoes. Now, I know I said that we don't need to even think about tomatoes here in Arkansas in January, but the last couple of years, I have started a few tomato plants at the very end of January 29th of last year actually, with the purpose of putting them in my heated greenhouse to get a head start. When the time was right, I planted them into grow bags where they grew in the greenhouse until the danger of frost had passed. Then I moved the grow bags outside and was able to enjoy an early harvest of tomatoes. over a month before tomatoes planted at their normal time. Now finally, while this isn't a crop that I plant in January, it's a crop that I have to plan for in January, and that is potatoes. If I order seed potatoes from an online source like Wood Prairie Family Farm, like I have the past several years, and I have a discount code for them in the description if you're interested, then I order them in January. When they arrive, usually they haven't come out of dormancy yet, so they need to be green sprouted indoors, which sometimes can take a few weeks, if not up to a month. I have more about that in a video that we'll share in the description. So what does all this mean for you, especially if you're not in the same climate as me? When you plant will be determined by your climate and your average last frost date, not your zone. Your garden zone is how low your winter temperatures get, not how you determine when to plant your spring crops. I know that's confusing, and if you're a new gardener, I've got a free download that will help you know exactly when to plant for your climate. It's called the When to Plant cheat sheet, and you can get it through the link in the description. Want to watch as I plant my first crops in my spring garden? Check out this video next.